Capture the Passion.
Welcome to season 2 of Capture the Passion. My name is Jorge Ramirez, I'll be the host, and today we have Dr. Tiesha Stewart. Dr. Tiesha Stewart will be talking to us about reflective communities. Tell us what that is.
Reflective communities is the safe, sacred, brave space that we want to create for educators and those that may be considering pursuing a career in education. And this space is sacred because it's a combination of theory and practice and what our educators may face on a day-to-day, but also the emotional component of this work. And I don't think we give enough space for that emotional work because for some, it's a heart of love. And when you're doing things from a heart of love, sometimes it can be rough. And the theory and the practice is there to kind of guide us, but I think this having reflective community helps educators and those pursuing this career be able to balance and look at it differently, if that makes sense.
So it's to help us have a better understanding of our own well-being.
There you go. And it processes the experience of an educator.
So why should we even consider going into education? I know especially since the pandemic, there's been a lot of shortage of teachers.
Yes.
We've had a huge turnover within teachers.
Mm-hmm.
How does this program help us retain teachers?
I believe creating this space for educators, first they have to have a sense of safety and that what they share in this sacred space will not be used against them. And in this space, we get the opportunity to kind of look at our emotions. And when you're doing the day-to-day of education, there's so much you go through. And in between the going through of teaching, you're getting bombarded with trainings and requirements, and you need to do this and do that and check off these boxes. But there's this human component, real human to human. And so in preparing, I think we should have these communities for educators and those who are looking to become an educator as to prioritize not just certain components in this profession, but that the well-being of our educators is thought of and held passionately. I've been a teacher, so I understand it. I've done these groups with educators, and I hear what they're experiencing. And so when we are pouring money in, it's only one part, and it does help. The money does help. The money helps. The money helps. But at the end of the day, people are still leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be a little bit more than just the money.
It's this sense of being burnt out.
Yes.
You mentioned trainings, you mentioned implementation, curriculum, assessment, grading, parent conferences, among the other things that we teachers know we have to go through.
Yes.
So help us understand how this program is going to help benefit us outside of the classroom, but then bring it back into the classroom where we don't feel burnt out.
Right. So in the Grounded Group Reflective with a group of educators, it was about 6 of us. We try to have a capacity of somewhere between 6 and 10, no more than 10. So they're like these little cohorts. And in that, we talked about why originally you became an educator. And there's that sense of getting back to the root of what drove and what was your heartbeat behind this career you chose. And then we talked about burnout and compassion fatigue, and they're actually 2 different things from a clinical perspective. But most describe as burnout as, I don't want to go to work today. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use those PTOs for the next couple of weeks. And I have heard of teachers who have drove up to school, dropped their keys off, and never looked back. Mm-hmm. That is burnout. And when you have so much on social media, these little clips, unfortunately, of teachers kind of at their wits' end, and they're not showing the best parts of themselves, from going off verbally on children or parents and things like that. And so what this does is bring a space where let's talk about the work you're doing. And more importantly, there's a little component of let's talk about the pandemic and how that affected you.
Right. So let me ask you this. I hear you talking about how you feel,
Mm-hmm.
emotions,
Yes.
feelings, right?
Yes.
Coming from a culture where
Mm-hmm.
we're not allowed
Mm-hmm.
to speak our emotions, especially growing up in a very machista
Yes.
culture, Mexican myself,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to, despite the research
Mm-hmm.
and the workshops that I've done about emotion, social
Mm-hmm.
emotional development, one of my area of research with young children, I kind of find it very difficult for me to talk about my own emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to help me come to the safe space and then internalize that for me to say, I can't talk about my emotions, despite my entire life, I've been told you can't feel.
Mm. And that is why Jonathan Picos has been such a help. He actually facilitates, and when needed, I'll step in. But he is a male himself, and he understands that. And the thing to remember with these reflective communities is there's no pressure to talk.
Got it. So I need to feel safe.
And if you don't feel safe, you are less likely to talk, right?
Right.
And so that's why we have the group so small, number one. Because there is proof and research that suggests the smaller groups, there's tends to be a little more safety for some people. Now, based on what you were saying, I think it is important to remember that there's no forcing to process and there's no forcing to feel. But if you can just simply allow yourself to be in this space to hear others, sometimes in hearing others, it creates this kind of normalizing of feelings.
Yeah.
So you don't feel alone.
Right. So hearing my peers talk about it, hearing someone else invites me to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I can talk about my emotions as well.
It can, yes, and in some cases you may not. I've been in, and I've participated in group reflection too. So as part of another job I do, we have to meet once a month. And some people talk, some people just listen. And I've been one where also growing up as an African American and in a predominant African American woman-led household, you got to muscle up.
Yeah.
Stop the tears. You got to get it done. And so it was still kind of similar to what you're saying. But through my own process and journey and participating in things like this, I am more comfortable with being curious about those spaces in me and kind of allowing them to come up when they need to.
So let's continue talking about that. How did this start for you? How did you say, you know what, that sounds like a route I'm going to take to be a mentor, to be a leader for others, to talk about things that can be seen as taboo in certain cultures,
Yes.
specifically in mine. How did this start for you?
So I was a preschool teacher for a long time, and then while I was pursuing my PhD, I was subbing, and I was a long-term sub at a particular children's center. And that was the worst, best experience my last year there because I had the opportunity to see the effects of trauma in young children. And for a lot of educators, we weren't prepared to do that. We weren't trained, and it's not part of our education. And secondly, we had nowhere within the staff to kind of share what that felt like. You know, having a child just throw themselves or just these things. So once I transitioned from the classroom to a home visiting supervisor, we have these components. And home visiting, in short, is a combination of 12 different other professions in one.
Right.
And one of those being we coach and we mentor and we get a lot of therapy classes, if you will, that are closely associated with getting your MFT. And so when I got to this position, it was so heart-led It was about your skill and checking off the boxes and doing the job, but the work is heartfelt and people led. And so with that, I learned the value of relationships and connection, and I learned about what it means to be a part of reflective community. And I was like, oh, I've been missing out. Oh my gosh. Because I had this instance of people caring not just about the check boxes of the work, but the human that's doing and checking off the boxes.
Let me ask you this question. I love what you said about that, about relationships. Being in the education field, it's very important for numbers, for the product, for test scores, right? In preschool, it's about the assessments that gets us the funding to run a program, the recruiting the families to make sure that we have enough numbers. One of the things that, through my experience, that I've noticed is that loss of relationships. Many times I've had people that I've mentored. How do you get children to learn? How do you get parents to take your advice? And I've always come back to the importance of building a relationship.
Yes.
What is building a strong relationship look like? Through not just your own personal perspective, because I'd love to hear that, but also through the program that you're working with.
I think one of the key components that I've learned in relationship building, there's several things, but one is to not make assumptions.
That's so critical.
Not make assumptions. And sometimes it's hard for us not to make assumptions. And that has a lot to do with some of our upbringing and things we've learned to cope with. And so we assume a lot, but we know very little. And so when you come just being open to the opportunity to relate, and we relate differently, with our families, professionally, and, there's this thing where some people are like, I'm just here to do the work.
I just work here.
I just work here. But it's like devaluing, because if you understand the work in the totality of it, we need you. You're human. We want to relate to you. We want to understand you. I want to understand you. And in these professions that we have, educators or even home visiting, when I was able to look at myself and reflect on those spotty, sketchy places in me, I am not an expert in relating. Matter of fact, I'm real closed off, and at times I can be either anxious or avoidant and pull away. And so sometimes, and over the course of time, I've had to learn what having a healthy relationship felt like.
Right.
And that was what my program manager did, was allow for the space for me to just show up as is, and her being unassuming.
Right. Kind of hard to get there, don't you think, specifically when we've grown up to pretty much, I think it's intergenerational or biases, the way we look at people, whether it be, I don't like yellow, so now I already have a perspective about you that influences the way I can relate to you.
Yes.
How does your program help us tune or remove that lens to help see you as an individual, as a human being?
So here's the thing. As people and professions are coming more deeply into diversity and inclusion, it's not the exclusion necessarily of biases, because biases are there actually in our brain for protection when you think about the rooting of it. But oftentimes through that protection over the course of years, it sprouts into these other things where we begin to exclude or pull away from, and we start to identify and assume things about certain people. And so it's very hard to, and I don't think reflective is about removing that, but it's about looking at it.
And understanding it.
And begin being curious before you even get the understanding. Because the curiosity and the wonder, and that's really about reflective community, is why do I think that?
Yes.
Why do I not like him because he has on a red shirt?
Yeah.
What is that? Where did that come from?
Right, right. And a lot of it comes from a theoretical perspective, social learning theory, right?
Yes.
It's so interesting on specifically, let's stick to the early childhood education field that you come from, how a lot of the times we fail to realize that children learn through other people's behaviors, right? A lot of the times children will be able to make their own biases based on what they saw, not necessarily experienced, that then
Yes.
eventually affects them long term.
Yes.
Seeing someone as a human being, I think it's very important. And I think through acknowledging that, hey, wait, I understand that I see that person different. Now I have to look at it, to
Yes.
reflect on it, to be able to move past it.
Yes. And how you can even repair some things. Because early on, we learn through relationships. Our whole life, we learn through relationships. And it's kind of, I joke about this because the social media platforms are so big on cutting people off and we're not having these types of relationships, but relationships ebb and flow all the time. And when we have those healthy relationships, they actually help us grow.
Yes.
And so in that, when we think about reflection and looking at ourselves, it can be very, very scary. This is why in those communities, there's no forced talk. Because it's the beauty of the unknowns that are happening in the group is that people are listening and they're already doing some
They're doing the work.
introspection and reflecting about themselves like, dang, I do that. And it's not about judging or shaming, but being curious about where did that come from? And then working with families and educators, I've learned people can, in some cases, connect the dots back to a very early experience.
Right.
And realize how long they've been having that bias or whatever that opinion was all their lives. But it isn't until you sit down and begin to be curious about your own experiences.
And to do that work, doing that work is very
Yes.
difficult because a lot of it has to do with looking at myself and acknowledging that, oh, that's got to change.
Right.
If I want to continue to grow and I want to be better and I want to be a leader, I got to change that aspect about myself.
Right. And like you were saying earlier, coming from your background, emotions was not really part of the format, the game
I wanted
plan.
to talk about it. How do I, where do
Come
I
on.
start?
It's like, what? I like Starbucks.
I love cardio.
You know, and so it's not about that you come in already ready, but it's the process of the experience and in that community that we grow and learn. And for some, it's your first introduction to safety in relationships.
Right. I hear you talking about breaking barriers. Like when I hear you speak in my mind, what I'm envisioning you do is walls and thick walls of cement and breaking them down, not bringing in the tools to break them, but having you start doing that work.
Yes.
And it's very difficult because, again, for me, if remember growing up and talking to my mom, it's more about you can feel angry, but you can't cry. Oh, don't cry, no chilles. You know, that was so much. And even now with my the grandkids for my mom, it's been about, oh, you know, don't let them cry. Like, Mom, it's okay to cry. So coming to a group like this, I can see myself sitting there and just saying, like, I'm gonna sit here and just be observant. Yeah, and okay, I'm gonna let everybody talk. I'm gonna drive home, stuck in that freeway, and reflect. And then that's where the hard work begins. And I think that a lot of the times, society has this perspective about therapy or about reflection that
Yes.
I have to do work without realizing that work is within yourself. You don't have to go out there and say anything, but still have a very productive time.
Yes.
I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this because
Yes.
being in the classroom, wanting to build those relationships, there's a lot of influence. You mentioned social media. Social media, whew, I mean, we can have a whole day conversation about social media.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
One of the things that really stands out in younger generations is the toxicity.
Yes.
In our culture is la tóxica, you know.
Yes.
Yo quiero ser la tóxica. I want to be that toxic person. And it's sort of, people see it as in that's the goal to be, when in reality, I mean, the term itself is, it's already telling you it's not healthy. Although you mentioned about us playing different hats or wearing different hats, but do we see that that can affect us in our work environment,
Yes.
or even in the way we interact with children? How do you help me learn to compartmentalize all of that to be able to say, you know what, for now I'm going to put this here. It's time for me to work. How can you help me do that?
You know, so I'm going to go this route if it's okay. I've heard principals and admin, and I love principals, by the way. We have a principal that participates in our group, and she's lovely, and she comes with a lot of insight, and she's really, truly trying to walk the reflective life and apply it with her teachers. And one thing I have heard is you leave all that at the door, and all the personal, all the emotional, all these things, leave it there, and you come and do the work. And what the work is, I'm going to save this stuff here, but the stuff we're trying to maybe compartmentalize can actually be a valuable and learning experience in the actual classroom itself. Like, for example, when you hear students prioritizing or, whoop whoop, toxic, I love it, hashtag toxic, that's me. A reflective conversation in the classroom to start off. What does that mean? Let's talk about that. I'm curious, because what I think toxic means, you may have a different spin on it. And so in social media, yes, it is highlighted as that's the thing to be, but where does that really come from? And how would you describe it? Not using the word toxic, but how would you describe it? And so Jonathan Picos, who is a licensed therapist, when you think about the components of what toxic may be, it kind of boils down to how people experience relationships. Again, relationships really do matter. And for some students that may be like, let's do toxic. What does that mean?
Right.
And I find things like that I've incorporated in college courses. We do a check-in on things, and I try to incorporate things that are popular on the social media platform, and I interweave it. And so it's like I'm building relationship, I'm helping support and build the reflective capacity, and I'm checking boxes.
Right.
And there's where the transformation can happen.
I love that. Yes. So I failed at relationships.
Okay.
I've come to the realization that a lot of it, and looking at it from a very analytical perspective, is based on the influence that I had growing up.
Yes.
Not justifying it. I'm not condoning it either, but I'm saying, okay, I get it. I understand. Is it possible for people to have failed relationships in the past and maybe said the wrong thing, done the wrong thing, but now be better at it?
I think it's absolutely possible. I think first acknowledging it.
Right.
And maybe not, and I would challenge the word failed as to maybe changing it to, I haven't had enough experiences with secure, positive, healthy relationships.
Oh gosh, you hit that right on the head with that. That's absolutely true. If you don't mind sticking to that topic.
Go ahead.
Healthy relationship, obviously, again, is influenced by our culture, by our parents' relationship,
Yes.
by what we saw. So is it possible for me to have this sense of guilt, this sense of I'm a failure, and this is just me believing it. I can't do anything right. I thought I had something great and now I don't. But can I come to terms to understand that part of it is not my fault because I just didn't know what healthy relationship was. So how critical is it for us to identify what healthy relationships looks like despite what we grew around with?
That's a excellent question, and I'm going to say this: that becomes one of the barriers in when I'm trying to create a reflective learning, safe learning community in classes I teach here, even at Rio Honda, is because people have had so many different types of experiences with relationships, especially with professors and then educators. They have their own traumatic experiences with educators. That's a whole different podcast. But it becomes a point where I have to not assume the worst and take into consideration that people are doing the best they can with what they have and what they know. And to further say is that the guilt and the shame kind of takes a little work. And sometimes it helps in processing what it happened to begin to kind of relieve the shame and the guilt. But it also can present an opportunity for you to say, let me just open a little bit to someone so I can start practicing and begin to learn what that healthy relationship looks like, what they look like. Guilt is unproductive, but it's something we do experience. And in guilt and shame, there's also vulnerability and allowing ourselves to, let me try something new, different.
Right. Again, I hear you speak and talk about this. It's a lot of building the individual.
Yes.
And come to terms to understand that I got to stop beating myself up, right? Especially if I'm a teacher. I'm in the classroom. I have X amount of students in the classroom that I want to build them up individually as a whole.
Yes.
Despite everything else that I have to do.
Right.
I need this. I need to find a way, a safe place to have these conversations, or even to listen to these conversations.
Yes.
More importantly, just to partake in it, to be able to say, okay, I can be a better teacher if I have that opportunity.
Yes.
So why should we go and be part of reflective communities?
Reflective communities can be the thing for the missing part of your work. It could be so fulfilling in its own way. It could also, there's no requirement to be perfect. There's no requirement to check off all the boxes. Show up in whatever capacity you can. And that's the first step.
That's the first step. That's the most critical step. So I want to wrap this up by asking you a question that I think it's important for everyone to know.
Yes.
To you, what is leadership?
Leadership?
Yes.
It's being able to be open to relationships that influence growth, development, and most importantly, love. And that's not always welcomed in some professions, but for educators, I think when we could establish that, not only in the classroom, but from the higher-ups administrative and that parallel process, we'll see a change in the classroom.
That sounds like just amazing work, and you're right, I think we need to come back for another one. And for everyone that wants to be part of a great organization, research into reflective communities with Dr. Tiesha Stewart, thank you so much for your time. We are very grateful to have your input for today.
This was a pleasure. Awesome. I love it.
So where can we find you? How do we find more information about you?
We
Instagram,
have
social media.
Yes, we do have Grounded Reflective Communities for Educators on Facebook. We're getting ready to build Instagram page. We also have an upcoming group coming up in November 12th. Space is limited. If there's organizations that are also interested in perhaps starting a reflective community at your school or with your organization with educators, they can email me at groundedreflectivecommunities@gmail.com. And we can talk about it, and we can schedule people to come in and begin to create these communities at your location.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Capture the passion.